T.A. Cunningham, we've talked about him a little bit, but he's a 2024 5-star, number 4 overall, number 1 defensive lineman in the class. He's out of Alpharetta, Georgia, which Alpharetta, Georgia, that might sound familiar to some of you because the Overtons are from Alpharetta, Georgia. But Cunningham, he really likes the Sooners. He's already 6'6", 265. Nigel Smith, we just talked about him, and we talked about David Stone. That's the number 1, 3, and 4 defensive linemen in the 2024 class. Not saying they're going to land them all, but my gut's telling me that they have a good chance of landing 2 out of 3. I think David Stone is probably the lock, and I would imagine that Cunningham is the most likely out of Nigel Smith and him. But the fact that OU is really in a great spot for all 3 of them at this point, it's 2024. It just speaks volumes to what the staff is doing right now. T.A. Cunningham, he is the number 1 defensive lineman in the class. He's a 2024 5-star defensive lineman, 6'6", 265 out of Alpharetta, Georgia. Like I said, number 1 defensive lineman, number 4 overall player in the class. I don't know how many of you people follow him on Twitter or you follow us on Twitter as well, because we're tweeting about T.A. Cunningham. He shows a lot of love to the Sooners, and obviously a lot of Sooner fans show a lot of love to him as well. It seems like that the new staff of Todd Bates and Venables have really hit it off with him, and the connection there, I assume they were recruiting him at Clemson, so that connection has already been started and it just transferred over. But for going through his Twitter and just quickly scrolling through, I see a lot of OU stuff. I see a lot of, Sooner fans, help me out. It's a lot of all OU stuff, which, take it as you will with social media. But I think, especially with the younger kids, that are sophomores going in their junior year, social media can say a lot of where a kid is leaning. I think as we have gotten further and further, with more social media and the announcements and the edits and everything else, I feel like social media lets you know exactly how they're feeling. I know sometimes they throw you off the trail a little bit to keep it interesting, but a lot of times you can read between the lines. And T.A. Cunningham, as a sophomore, he had 22 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, an extremely just a phenomenal athlete. I mean, how many sophomores, and we're going to talk about a couple of the great sophomores, but there aren't many that will crack the varsity lineup alone and then record, 7 sacks in their first season on varsity. I mean, that's incredible. And, he's from Alpharetta, Georgia, which I don't know if that town rings a bell with anyone that's watching this. That's where the Overtons are from. So they're friends. Could it be that the Overtons and Cunningham are like, hey, long-term, let's play together? Jose, what do you think about Cunningham and the potential of him and those odds for the Sooners to land him?
Well, I hope that you are onto something with that Alpharetta connection, because that'd be pretty mean trio to put together, let alone all the other guys that are going to be coming with him and already on campus. But yeah, this guy's super talented. I 100% agree with the social media stuff. That's kind of where I see all myself, and kind of whenever we talk about these guys, like where I gauge the odds of us actually having an opportunity to have them commit. And a guy like him and other guys that we've talked about always showing love to Oklahoma is definitely a good sign and leaning in the right direction. I think that this is going to be a really important person to focus on for the coaching staff during this weekend, especially since he's there for a long weekend. He'll get to see the practices. He'll get to meet probably all of the coaches, not just stick around with Todd, because even though that's his defensive line coach, he'll probably have run-ins with all the other coaches during some sort of team drills or film watching if he needs help or anything. But it'll be again a guy that we need to focus on. Like you said, number 1 defensive lineman in his class, and that could change. But I mean, he's got a pretty good start with, like you said, his sophomore season, not just cracking that varsity lineup, but probably being one of their top performers, if not the top performer of his high school team. So TA, just go ahead and commit, bud. I know it's a long time away, but just do it. You're muted, Bonnet.
Muted.
Of all the four kids that we're going to talk about on tonight's pod, T.A. Cunningham is the one that I'm currently feeling the most comfortable about. And kind of a lot of that is kind of just that social media presence that he has with Oklahoma at the moment. Granted, it is very, very early on in all of these kids' recruitment process, as they are all sophomores, at least that we're talking about tonight. But at the moment, as it sits right now, what is it, March 23rd, 2022, I am feeling quite confident that T.A. Cunningham will be a Sooner, just with the way that things are playing out. He has the perfect size, I think, for a defensive end. 6'6", 265, 270. That's exactly what Jason Taylor played at, who is an NFL Hall of Famer. You mentioned his 22 tackles for loss and 7 sacks. And a stat that pointed out to me, or that stuck out to me too, along with those 7 sacks and 22 tackles for loss, is he had 9 pass breakups on the season too last year, or as a sophomore. So to me, when I see that, I think he has the intelligence to understand if he's getting doubled or if he's just not going to get home to the quarterback. He knows the next best thing. Get your big body up there, that big frame of yours, and try to get a hand on the ball. And that's, if you're not going to get a sack, that's the next best thing you can do. Either bat it down, or even better yet, somehow send it 60 yards into the air, and it falls right into a lap of your safety or a linebacker for a turnover. So he's a monster on the field. He's got great size. I'm the most confident about T.A. Cunningham as it sits right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, social media isn't everything, but it definitely means something. You can't fake it. It just doesn't work. So I mean, with Cunningham, I agree. Out of all these kids that we're going to talk about, I do feel the best about him. But also, like you said, I mean, we're talking, this is March of 2022. I mean, these kids won't sign at the earliest until December of 2023. We're a year and 9 months away. A lot of stuff can happen. As long as this coaching staff, Todd Bates and Venables, and overall the majority of it sticks together, they're going to have a great chance with him. Georgia, as OU moves in the SEC, is becoming an extremely targeted recruiting hotbed. I mean, because they produce a lot of talent. Obviously, you've got the Bulldogs there, and you've got Alabama there, Auburn, all these schools that OU is going to start competing with for great Georgia players. And speaking of another great Georgia player, someone that T.A. Cunningham is pretty good friends with is Heaven Brown Schuler. He's a 6'4", 290-pound defensive lineman out of Atlanta, Georgia, number 17 overall, number 2 defensive lineman, and a 5-star. So you got T.A. Cunningham, who's the number 1 defensive lineman. You got Heaven Brown Schuler as the number 2 defensive lineman, and they're buds, and they're coming to visit together. Brown Schuler has actually played a little bit of, he started playing varsity a little bit in his freshman season. He played 4 games. Only had 1 sack last year. He ended up playing more freshman year. He played 6 games and had 1 sack. As a sophomore, he played in 4 games and had 4 sacks. He's an extremely talented kid. I mean, nearly the same size, just a couple inches shorter, but definitely heavier. So he's playing more of the interior defensive line. He's already pushing 300 pounds. And that's another thing we got to think about. These kids are sophomores. They're 16 years old. And they're already 6'4", 6'6", 260, 300 pounds. And these kids are like men at this point, basically, which is incredible to me. So they're really good friends. You think about Cunningham at number 1, Brown Schuler at number 2, David Stone is number 4, I believe, or number 3. And they all talk about playing together. I mean, that's pretty incredible. Like Brandon said, you lose out on a 5-star and you got another 5-star that's putting you in their top 4. Not a bad day in the office. Speaking of another 5-star, different class, T.A. Cunningham, 6'6", 265 from Alpharetta, Georgia, 2024 5-star, number 4 overall, number 1 defensive lineman in the class. Visited OU this weekend. Seemed to have a great visit. Posted multiple pictures, multiple tweets, multiple posts about his visit, and it looked like he had a great time. I believe this was his first visit to OU. And, again, the relationships between Venables, Bates, and Chavis are paying huge dividends. And, OU sees him as a defensive end, where a lot of schools see him as an interior defensive lineman. And I think that's why OU has jumped out to an early lead, plus having the staff on, recruiting him. And I believe Bates has been recruiting him since he's been at Clemson as well. Came out, there was a crystal ball that came in for him after this weekend. There's a long way from this being over, of course, with Venables' policy of once you commit, you're not visiting elsewhere. It's going to be very similar to where we're not going to see a ton of commits early in the cycle. You're going to see a lot of it like an avalanche of in December and January and February of every recruiting cycle, just like Clemson does. Cunningham, he might pull the trigger early, but I don't see that coming anytime really soon. But I think what's going to be telling is to see when his next visit will be. And I'd imagine it'll be relatively soon. It's hard to say exactly when. It's just, he's probably going to be taking unofficial visits. So it's going to be on his own dime, his family's dime. It just depends on what they can afford and what they want to do. And if they want to go elsewhere, I think he's got visits this coming weekend to Tennessee State and Vanderbilt, I believe. He's visiting a couple schools this weekend. But Jose, what do you think about Cunningham? I know we've talked about him a lot, but just seemed like he had a great time.
Yeah, I think it's good that he picked up a crystal ball, but you said it's way too early in his recruitment. We're far from done with him committing. And honestly, like moving forward, I don't think we're going to see a lot of people commit 2 years before even the early signing day, because NIL is such a big thing, right? To probably a lot of kids. And even though I still believe that it's not the sole decision or sole reason why most kids will decide on a school versus another, it is going to play a part in their recruitment. And NIL will more than likely change a lot over the next couple of years with the amount of money that schools will be able to give. If there's ever regulations put in place, that'll be a situation that kids will have to look into. So yeah, I wouldn't expect many kids to start committing to maybe like a couple months before the early signing day. So maybe start seeing them in like August, September, rather than 2 years before they can even sign a letter of intent. But it is good. Like you said, we have an early start on him. We'll just have to continue that communication over the next, year and a half until he can actually sign that piece of paper that says he's going to be a Sooner. But I mean, you said it, he's really good. We've talked about him a few times, and we've got a lead on him. And he's the number one defensive lineman in his class, right? We've got 2 and 3 in that class as well. We have the number 1 edge, I think, and then 2 as well in that class that we've got some pretty good leads on.
Yeah, I was going to say David Stone is up there, and Nigel Smith is another one. So those are the top 3 of 4 defensive linemen in that class. I mean, 2024 is going to be a humongous class. I think it's going to be arguably the best class OU has seen in recent memory. I'm going to go way out on a limb, but the staff will be coaching long enough. There'll be a good track record. They'll establish their roots. I really think 2024 is going to be a huge class. Not that 23 won't be good, because it will be good, but I think 2024 could be a top 5 class. Brandon, do you have anything to say about T.A. Cunningham?
I think T.A. Cunningham at 6'6", 270 is going to be so fun playing defensive end for us. He's a guy that had, I think, upwards or near double-digit pass deflections last season too, when I looked at his numbers, which is obviously with that size, it makes a lot of sense. But I think we mentioned him in a couple of videos ago, and I think we all mentioned of all the 24 kids or whatever, I'm very, very confident that T.A. Cunningham will eventually be a Sooner. Obviously, there's a long time in this process as he is class of 24, but I feel pretty good about that one. I would, if I were a betting man, I would bet a decent amount that he ends up a Sooner.
Yeah. And that's something we're going to be watching this recruitment for the next year and a half. So again, already hit the subscribe button. I mean, we're going to keep it rolling. If another year, we're hitting the year mark today, we're going to get you another year in 2023, which will be here before we know it.
The defensive line is going to be just disgusting. I mean, with you got Beeman potentially, you've got as you mentioned David Stone, who I think we're all very, very confident about. T.A. Cunningham, who we're all very, very confident about. God, yeah, it's scary to think about what that line can look like in 2 or 3 years.
And then there's Nigel Smith, another 5-star. Helvins, Brown, Schuler, I think they're both 5 stars in the 2024 class. I mean, it's ridiculous.
No, yeah, I mean, yeah, and not even, I mean, yeah. DJ Hicks, he's, it's absurd what they are building there, and the possibility of having them all in the same defensive line is stupid, but it's a lot of fun, and I think some of them, T.A. Cunningham and David Stone specifically, are pretty much a lock in my opinion.